Hello, everyone. We just finished up with the FIDE Grand Prix tournament, and I would like to look at the Vienna game. I've been doing a series for a few videos on Grandmasters' responses to different openings, and I haven't really um, been trying to be biased toward the white or black side, but just trying to be as objective as possible and just seeing how grandmasters deal with certain openings and try to answer the question that often comes up is which is why you don't see such and such an opening played too much at grandmaster level, and hopefully looking at a few games you'll see why. Sometimes it's just a matter of fashion. It's not really a matter of a opening being bad or unsound. It's just that, just like clothing and um, music, certain things just go out of style. So um, it's good to be able to know if an opening is just flat out bad, or is it just something that's not in style at the top level. Um, Now the Vienna is a funny opening because it's not bad per se, but it doesn't really offer as much prospects, right, to these grandmasters today, as far as having an opening advantage as, say, Roy. They feel they would get in a Roy Lopez or um, some of the queen pawn openings. Now it's funny because I just mentioned the Roy Lopez, and it's funny that Berlin Wall is makes it very difficult to play e4, and also the Sicilian. But I think White has better chances in the Sicilian. But the Berlin Wall makes it very difficult to play e4. And if you notice, most of the games in the FIDE um, Grand Prix were D4, C4, Knight F3. So Grandmasters are definitely leaning towards playing these closed positions where they have more opportunities, um, to play in a more subtle fashion. So here we go with the Vienna game. What is the Vienna game? So e4, e5, and knight c3. So instead of playing knight f3, which is the usual sequence, which threatens the e pawn right away, White instead develops a piece on knight c3 and defends his e pawn from a later attack. So it's kind of like a prophylactic move. But the other idea behind it is that the Vienna game is a cousin to the King's Gambit. Some would say it's its brother. And by holding back the knight on from coming to f3, you retain the option of playing f4. So you get to play a King's Gambit without um, the e pawn being unprotected. And this was a specialty a long time ago of a player named Weaver Adams, who had developed a system um, called White to Play and Win based on the Vienna game and playing that. But the Vienna game took a hit because he had a match with a player named can't remember the first name. I think his name was Lyman or something like that, where he played his system and Lyman took the black pieces and defeated Weaver Adams in the match. Um, so the first game we're gonna look at just the opening sequence and with some brief comments because I want to go over a couple of games just so you get the gist of how the GMs are handling this with the black pieces. So one more comment too about the knight c3. It's a good good thing to play. Like you can't really go wrong with that. But the downside is that white is not threatening anything by playing knight c3, and this gives black a lot of leeway in his responses. He can play knight f6, knight c6, whatever. At least when you play the move knight f3, the e pawn is threatened and something has to be done about that threat. With the move knight c3, black's not under any obligation to do anything concerning the e pawn. So the usual move that is played at Grandmaster level is knight f6, and that's what we're going to look at. Knight c6 is possible, of course, a whole bunch of other moves, but most Grandmasters play knight f6. Now, this move, f4, which you always see at amateur level, is not the move that most GMs play. We're going to look at this game. This game is between Savchenko with the white pieces, who was rated 2644, against the Chinese Grandmaster Wang Yu, who was 2734 at the time with the black pieces. This is from the World Cup 2009. So he played this Vienna Gambit, and of course, everybody should know that this is the response that basically puts it out of business. I remember reading in Alacon's Greatest Games, he wrote about this as the reason why he stopped playing the Vienna as white, because of this response that that white had. So after knight f6, f4, d5, f takes e5, and knight takes e4. This is all opening theory, very common. You should know this. Knight f3, or study it if you don't. Knight c6, and there's different ways that white attempts to get this knight out that's entrenched on e4. Sometimes he plays d3, you get queen e2, you get all type of moves. But that knight has to go. It's very, very annoying. Queen e2, bishop f5, solidifying the knight, and d3 is a normal move here. But Savchenko wants to play d3 without exchanging the knight on c3. And already here, white is, kind of in trouble already. So this is not what you have in mind when you're playing the white pieces. Wang Yu then played the move knight g5. c3 was played. Now there's a get in d4. Now if knight takes g5 here, then white has a nice, black has a nice in-between move, knight d4, which is winning. So that's the main idea behind that move. And this is why c3 is played, not only to stop the threat, but also to play d4 at some point. Another strong move for black here, instead of knight g5, is just simply bishop g4, and then with the threat of knight d4 with the same idea. And then say for instance c3, which is practically forced. Now you can just snatch the pawn. So after bishop f5, knight d1, knight g5 was a good move, and black was already had a nice advantage. c3, he decided to take here. He could have played bishop e7, queen takes f3, queen h4, knight f2. Notice if g3, we run into some problems here at the queen e4 check. Rook in the corner, and then this pawn drops. So if the queen h4 check, knight f2 was played. And we can see that in this line, black had absolutely no problems, and Wang Yu went on to win this game. Bishop e2, bishop c5, and black is extremely well off in this position. So this move f4, although popular at the amateur level, is really not popular at the GM level at all. Another example in this line took place in the game Karpov 2604 versus TL Petrosian. This is not the world champion, but another Tigran Petrosian. He was 2597 at the time with the black pieces. So f4 was tried, e takes, and instead of this line, which you see normally, this is another line that was tried by GMs a few years ago. It's a very risky line right here. E4 was played, just creating a wedge in the position, and now it looks like kind of like a Forkbeer counter gambit. Normal is just to play E takes, and then you transpose into King's Gambit here. So sometimes you see this line, but it's very rare. And normal is transposing into the King's Gambit um, variation here. Well, actually, it's still a Forkbeer variation after after E4. This is the Forkbeer variation, but this is the old line of the Forkbeer. The modern Forkbeer is to just take here. So that game went E4, D3, and it's all about this wedge in the center. White trying to remove it, black trying to keep it and obtain the positional advantage. Bishop D2. See castles here. See knight takes E4, rook E8. And we can see for the sacrifice of the pawn, black has obtained some activity here. And this game also, black went on to win. And black tried to white tried to give back some material in order to catch up in development. But pawn structure is just too shattered and weak in order for him to maintain his positional integrity here. And then here, Pankratov decided to give up his queen. And again, black was comfortable the whole game, even though he did not even play the best line. He played this old school Forkbeer counter gambit. But again, if you see this, just take here, and this is your modern Forkbeer, which has a sounder reputation. But again, prepare for these things. So if you do want to play this old line Forkbeer, at least know what's going on in the position. Okay, last game in this line with F4 was a game between player Istrachu and versus none other than the great Anatoly Karpov, who totally demolished this line. And so F4 was played D5, and just the traditional F takes E5, which you see most of the time. Knight takes E4, Knight F3, and Bishop E7, which is the line I like to play. Queen E2, again challenging the knight, and then knight simply played knight captures on C3. Again, sometimes you might see this Bishop F5, or even F5 is possible. That's one of the old lines. But knight takes C3 is enough for black to have easy equality. C5 from Karpov, Bishop F5, and now white is going to try to maintain that central pawn on E5 and create the conditions for a kingside attack. Knight C6, Queen F2, H6, Bishop E2, Queen B6, and now he's asking black the question if he wants to, black is asking white the question if he wants to castle on the queen side or not. And white declines. And we can see how easily Karpov completes his development here. He probably didn't even have to trade there. Could have played Bishop E6, but what the heck, he's equalized. And his idea in doing that was to win a pawn. And after playing over 100 games with the possibly the greatest tactical player of all time, and Gary Kasparov. Um, Karpov has good sense in being able to determine when it is okay to snatch a pawn with his queen. So after rook d1, queen a2, castle, taking space in the center. Knight is redirecting itself to e6. Good move by Karpov. Queen g3. And we had this idea of bishop h6 on the table, but Karpov again just smoothly snatches the pawn, not even worried. Again, this man played over 100 games with Kasparov, and therefore he's not, he's not easily moved by these type of positions from white. Rook de1 is played. One of the ideas inherent in the position, of course, this knight here is protecting g7, but if he still tries to snatch this pawn due to the situation of the king and queen being in opposition, then white has a rude awakening in store at the bishop d6, because now if queen h3, of course, then you can snatch the bishop. And then if he tries to stay here, on the same file as the king, then you keep hitting him. Play f5. And then if he still tries to stay, he's real stubborn. And then you play rook f6. And then the piece is lost. So this is why bishop takes h6 wasn't played. Instead, rook de1. And then, of course, the offerings of trading off pieces by Karpov. And so we see that white's kingside attack, or so-called attempts at attack, is diminished, and black has the space on the queen side. He also has a 4-3 pawn majority over there, and he has a 3-2 majority on the king side. So all he has to do is basically consolidate the position, and that's what Karpov does. Just avoid any cheap tactical shots. And after rook f6, it's too much of a material advantage, and white resigned. So that move, 3f4, is really a persona non grata at the top, at the Grandmaster level. It's too easy to equalize against that. All right, before we get into the main line of what you're gonna see from GMs, and if you're playing, interested in playing this with the white pieces, the games you probably should study. I just want to show you one more very obscure line that you hardly ever see at GM level, which is after knight f6 is this move bishop c4. Sometimes you might see that in the amateurs, but again, you hardly ever see this at GM level. It's possible to transpose into different openings, of course, from here, like the Joko piano, for instance, even certain lines of the Scotch. And usually just knight c6, and then after this move d3, you see the quick attack on the bishop on c4, which is one of the main lines. After queen f3, just knight takes, d takes, and black equalizes immediately. It's just too the play is too primitive for black to really have to be concerned. So I just wanted to show you that real quick before we get to our main line here. Again, with bishop c4, I won't call it a refutation, but it's basically I told you earlier why Alekhine um, stopped playing the Vienna as white when he was a young chess player. This is actually the reason. Is after this move, bishop c4, knight takes e4. And that's, of course, is based on the very simple idea of knight takes e4 followed by d5. And then sometimes you get this line, um, which white tries to win a rook in the corner. It's called the Frankenstein-Dracula variation. But black can easily avoid this by just giving back the pawn, not trying to hold anything. By just trading off the queens, and then you get some similar play as to the Berlin Wall with the knight on f5, except the pawns are not damaged on the queen side, so you get kind of like an enhanced version, and then everything gets traded off. And that game was from Gilberto Miles and Zhao Zhangwan 2008. So that's another way to go, is knight takes e4. But again, if you want to avoid like super complicated lines, you can just play knight c6, or you can just try to give back this pawn instead of trying to hold on to the pawn, like playing g6 and queen f3, knight, and all of that stuff. Just give back the pawn immediately and play in this manner and just equalize. All right, let's get to the fun. All right, finally. Okay, now, so after knight f6, so we already kind of ruled out f4 as not, really being that spectacular, and we ruled out bishop c4, right, due to not only knight c6, but just knight takes e4. So what are the GMs that do play this as white and actually trying to win? What do? Well, g3. Very quiet, positional, inspired game. Not avoiding all the fireworks with f4 and things of that nature, but just playing g3, playing on Fianchetto and the bishop, playing a slow, solid game with pressure on the light squares. Now, one of the specialists in this line is the Chinese Grandmaster Yu Yang. So if I was interested in playing this, I would study his games, and we're gonna look at a few of them. This game is a rapid game versus another Chinese player. This is from the 4th All China Games Rapid in 2010. Now, Chinese player with the black pieces was rated 2652. So at the time, he was about 70 points higher rated than Yu Yang. His name was Zhao Jingchao. Game went g3 from Yu Yang, and bishop c5, which is a very normal and common response. After all, why play the move d6 and block your bishop in the pawn chain when you don't have to? So you play bishop c5, and of course you have all kind of threats. Maybe you get to play this move at some point. Maybe in combination with here. Okay, so bishop c5, bishop g2, d6, knight ge2, knight c6, castle. Now let us just state here that, of course, black is equalized. So don't think you're getting any kind of advantage, right? But what you're striving for is a position that you feel comfortable with and that you know well. All right, and that goes a long way when you're playing somebody over the board. You know the position really well and you feel comfortable with it. So a6. So you see, this position as black reminds me of like the Joko piano. It's kind of like black is playing a Joko piano against the Vienna, so to speak. d3, that's how I would look at it. Castle, h3. Again, you see how slow the white is playing. Nothing spectacular. But some players excel in these type of positions where they rock their opponent to sleep. Bishop e6. Opponent starts yawning, and next thing you know, he's made a mistake. So knight d5. So what's going on with knight d5? Well, he would like to take with the knight, but there would be a fork there after pawn takes. So instead, he takes with the bishop. He wants to get that piece out of there. Now, I would like to remove this knight, but using this c6 pawn. So instead of playing bishop takes d5 as Zhao Jingchao did, giving up the bishop here so early in the game, because maybe I would like to play a move like that later on, you know? So maybe a move like knight b4. But play bishop takes d5, e takes d5. So now the bishop pair belongs to white. Knight e7. Bishop g5, threatening to double up the pawns. Knight g6. And now c4. Okay. And black is still okay. It's nothing for white to scream for joy about. Bishop e3. Queen d7. King h2. Rook a b8. Rook b1. a5. Queen d2. Rook a8. b3 was played. Now I like this move, bishop c5, doubling up the pawns, because these are the type of small positional advantages that you play for when you play real slow like that. Instead, he played b3. Knight dropped back, and now he took. So now you see a little cracks in the position, but nothing to write home about. f4. Now rook takes f4. Knight g6. Queen comes down. Rook bf1. And again, it's nothing for white to celebrate here. Rook f8. Now d4 comes. And now rook e7 with the normal idea of just doubling up the rooks. Now, this was what I'm talking about, rocking the opponent to sleep. So rook e7, right? What could be wrong with that? Well, d takes c5 happens. Queen takes c5. Now the knight comes into d4. So just like that, now you have to worry about the move knight to f5. And not only knight f5 attacking the rook on e7, but now you got to worry about knight takes h6. Removing the defender of this knight on f6 after g takes h6. So knight e4 gives up the bishop. Rook takes, and knight f5 anyway. Rook's double, right? And this is the ultimate rocking your opponent to sleep moment. Black figures everything is okay, continues on with this plan, and plays rook a8. Now if you want, you can pause the video and find white to move and win here. Just like that, it's over. Alright, so Yang Yi played knight takes g7. Because it's all possible due to the weakness, the f7 pawn. This is why instead of rook a8, rook f8 is correct, and white just has a slight advantage because he can still press a little bit. Moves like queen c3, threatening mate, then move like rook e5. So in black, white has something to work with. Black is all right, but this is a good position for white. So instead, he played rook a8, and after knight takes g7, king takes g7, rook's penetrated, rook takes f7, king g8, and black's position fell apart just like that. And after rook e2 check, king h1, and mate is coming up shortly. Another way to play this position is for a kingside attack with the white pieces. And this game is from Judith Polgar, with it was rated 2680 at the time, and with the black pieces was Vasily Ivanchuk. And this is a blitz game from 2009, the World Blitz tournament. We could see again equality achieved. And notice black's position. This is like the setup I like as black against this opening, because you can use the same setup against the Joko piano. And it's, you learn this structure and then you can use it against different openings. And it's always nice to be able to do that. Saves you a lot of study and preparation. You just have to worry about nuances. So Ivan took trades. Again, this is a blitz game, and he's already, again, equalized. But I just wanted to show you the options that white has in the position. So now we can see with the open F file that Polgar wants to attack on the king side. So rook F2, knight H7, rook AF1, F6 by Savchenko. Kind of risky, weakening the light squares like that. H4, C6, planning on D4, D5, excuse me. Bishop, again exploiting the weakness on the light squares. King H8, King H2, and finally D5. Polgar plays rook G2 and wants to play G4, G5, Queen D6, Bishop F5, and rook G2. And Polgar actually went on to win this game. Right here, the position's pretty much up for grabs, but like I said, it was a blitz game. I just wanted to show you the different options that white has in the position. So we saw a slow play in the center by Yang Wei in the first game, and here we see this play on the king side, more aggressive by Judith Polgar in this game against Savchenko. One of the things in this opening that you have to be careful of with the black pieces is opening up the center too early. This move D5, notice I've been showing you games with Bishop C5 because that's like the normal continuation. The Grandmasters prefer getting the pieces out. This early strike in the center is completely natural, but black can run into some problems if he's not careful. This game between Jagantsev 2635 versus Boris Avrukh 2668 2009. So Avrukh played D5, E takes D5, Knight takes D5, and Bishop G2. So you have themes similar to the English, where Bishop comes to G2, Knight on C3, and now challenging for control of this square. Knight normally would drop back in the English. Now here he takes, B takes C3, and now white has some pawn islands, but has open lines, and the open lines are pretty good when you have this when you have a lead in development. Bishop D6, Knight F3, castle, castle, Knight D7, and D4. So now white center is being challenged. H6, rook E1, E takes, C takes, Knight B6, Queen D3. And we see the open lines benefiting white here. C5, A4, Queen F6, A5, Bishop F5, Queen B6. Now the knight must move. Bishop B2, Queen D8, and white's forces are pretty much fully developed. Knight H4, Bishop takes C2, Bishop H3. Now the knight on D7 is in danger. Knight F6, D takes C5, and we see the opening of the position while black's pieces are kind of awkwardly placed. Bishop C7, Bishop F5. This exchange brings the knight up the board closer to black's king, and we can see with the bishop here, knight here, things look pretty dangerous. Notice how white is not even really bothered with this pawn. You got the open D file, so it's easy to find a place for this rook. Game continue, Queen D7, and just traded queens. And now he penetrates to the 7th rank, and boom, The position just is ripe for the picking. And just like that, he just snatches everything on the king side. And then he trades down, and the game is over. Now that looked very, very straightforward and simple. And that makes you want to stay away from this move, d5. Now, although I think bishop c5 is a little bit better than d5, d5 is a close, close second. But it wouldn't be fair for me to show you d5 as, in a massacre game like that. This game was between Yu Hai Fan and Wesley So back in 2011. And Wesley So did a better job with the black pieces here. He was able to equalize. He got his pieces out. And he played a real good idea by playing e5 and then f5. He kept the position kind of closed until he was able to catch up in development. See, and now white has the double pawns on the c file. In compensation, white has a bishop pair, but this allows black to equalize comfortably, and that's what he did in this game. Good move by Wesley. And he just traded down and eventually drew this game comfortably. Alright, in closing, I would like to show you this last game real briefly between Luke McShane and Alexander Morozevich. And of course, Morozevich chose a more dynamic option, bishop c5, just getting his development going. c6 here with the idea of playing d5 after a good preparation, d3 and d5. You can't go wrong with this idea. As white has postponed the knight f3 move, putting pressure on the e5, why not establish the center? Queen e2, simply castle. Now knight f3, putting the pressure on e5, but rook e8. Castle, knight bd7, h3, h6, knight h2. The idea is to bring the knight to g4. Knight g4, knight 8, h7. Just replaces the knight. And black is already better. Black has more space in the center, and everything else is equal. So you have to give black the nod. So bishop d4. Bishop e6. Knight to e3. And now black decides to play on the queen side. Bishop d2, bishop b6, c3, queen d7, rook a d8, bishop e1, and a5. And black had an advantage here, although white was able to hold the position for the draw. So this is not exactly ideal position you're looking for if you're playing with the white pieces, but this is a great position if you're playing with the black pieces. So let's just sum up my thoughts and opinion about the Vienna game. I think the Vienna game is definitely a solid option, especially if you're an amateur player. Of course, like we're all amateur players, but especially if you're like playing at the club levels. You can stick with your f4 if you want to play the Vienna Gambit, but I think g3 is excellent way to play. And there's a lot of Grandmaster material that you can follow too, and you can learn a lot from playing this style of play, and a lot of Grandmasters games follow. It is a dangerous weapon, but at the same time, there's a lot of Grandmasters playing on the black side. And an easy setup to remember is, again, your preparation against the Joko piano systems. You can use that and play the same way against the Vienna game with g3. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Um, Basic summary, what are the GMs playing? Well, they're not really playing F4 too much. They're really kind of staying away from the Vienna Gambit. They're not playing, and when I say F4, they're not playing F4 here. They're also avoiding 3 bishop C4 unless they're just trying to draw real quick. So if GMs are playing it, they're going with G3. So that's what GMs are playing. And then what are GMs playing on the black side versus this? Well, 2 moves. Bishop C5, which I like. I like to get the pieces out first. And they're playing mainly D5. So D5 is like an earlier strike at the center. Um, and Bishop C5 develops first. And then again, you can go and play D6, A6, Knight C6, H6, kind of like you were playing the Joko piano. Or you can play as Morozevich did with Bishop C5, Bishop G2, and C6 with this preparation to strike in D5. Okay, well, I hope you learned a little bit about how Grandmasters play against this opening, both for and against. And please like and subscribe. And as usual, I'll see you in the next video.